The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Mikhail Khidureli, director of Enterprise Georgia, declares that a total of 1 billion lari mortgage loans were issued within the framework of the state mortgage subsidy program. According to him, in total, 10,000 apartments were sold within the program. The law office, which defends the interests of former Prime Minister Bidzina Ivanishvili, released a statement on possible sanctions and credit use. According to the representatives of the law office, on July the 5th, Ivanishvili received a letter from Credit Suisse explaining that the European Parliament's resolution imposing sanctions on Ivanishvili created regulatory obligations on the part of the bank and that the trust will no longer carry out its actions without court approval. The chairman of the Budget and Finance Budget Committee of the Parliament expects growth of more than 6% this year, citing inflation as the main challenge. We will perform revenues of the state budget with an excess. Progress is recorded in practically all directions. We have the opportunity to end the current year with a higher economic growth rate than what is included in the state budget, and that's 6%. I do not rule out some adjustment of the state budget in the direction of growth in fall. Kovzanadze said, adding that it is important to tighten the monetary and credit policy and to reduce the budget deficit in the fiscal sphere. This year, we have made progress in both directions. The policy has been tightened and the budget deficit has decreased from 9.3% to 3.6%, which affects both inflation and the lari exchange rate. Hopefully, this trend will continue, Irakli Kovzanadze noted. The competition agency will present the results of the 6-month monitoring of the fuel market next week. Irakli Lekfinadze, chairman of the competition agency, told BM According to him, the report has studied the factors affecting fuel price formation. As Lekfinadze noted, the agency will also present specific recommendations. This is The Checkpoints, authored and hosted by myself. I'm Elena Kvanchilashvili, executive editor of Forbes Georgia, and The Checkpoints team is ready to cover the week in business and economics for you. We will have a slightly different format today, since we will be presenting the analysis of the current situation in Georgia and beyond by two influential international financial institutions, EBRD and the IMF. Both of them found time to talk to BMG TV and The Checkpoints. Let's start with the IMF. Indeed, this week was very active for the International Monetary Fund in Georgia, since Jihad Azur, director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund, visited the country to get the on-site idea of how the economy is doing in Georgia and what are some macroeconomic challenges and opportunities facing the country. Mr. Azur had intensive meetings with all stakeholders, including government, National Bank of Georgia, private sector, business, media, and students. What we know from the official reporting is that Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili met with Jihad Azur of the IMF, and the meeting focused on the close cooperation between Georgia and the fund, with a special emphasis on the new program recently approved by the IMF, especially in light of the situation in the region. The parties discussed the country's economic situation and macroeconomic parameters, underlining that Georgia maintains positive dynamics, with the average economic growth in January-May reaching 11.2%. Irakli Garibashvili highlighted specific directions prioritized by the Georgian government, including the importance of energy independence, reinforcing infrastructure, ensuring food safety, and implementing structural reforms. The Prime Minister thanked Jihad Azur for support and the work carried out by the IMF for the benefit of Georgia. The meeting at the government administration was attended by the Assistant to the Director of Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund, Francisco Parodi, and the IMF resident representative for Georgia, Selim Chakir. The governor of the National Bank of Georgia, Qoba Gvenetadze, also held a working meeting with Mr. Jihad Azur, the director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund. The parties discussed the economic situation of the country and the challenges in the region at the meeting. Qoba Gvenetadze introduced the reforms carried out by the NBG as well as the current macroeconomic trends to Mr. Jihad Azur. The governor also talked about the measures implemented by the NBG in response to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the conversation touched upon the supporting program standby arrangement approved by the Board of Executive Directors of the IMF. Also, Jihad Azur and Qoba Gvenetadze met with students where they talked about the challenges in Georgia and the region, the effects of the war in Ukraine and the global economy. I was also able to meet Jihad Azur in person during his visit in Georgia as the representative of business media. Our loyal viewers and followers remember a number of, I would say, very interesting interviews with the director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund. All these interviews were via Zoom, and it was a pleasure to see my respondent finally face to face. The meeting behind closed doors lasted for almost an hour, and we touched almost all the important topics that are on Georgia's and, to say frankly, on the global agenda as well, including inflation, monetary policy, economic growth, and such topics that might have an impact on Georgia's business community and environment as well. The reform agenda of the IMF is largely directed to set up a level competitive field for public and private sectors. One reform in this direction is SOE reform. It is seen as an element that will bring additional productivity to the economy and help the recovery. And another topic is basically getting rid of unnecessary tax exemptions through evaluating their impact and for generating more revenues for the budget in the face of high uncertainty that Georgia and the rest of the world are still facing due to several complex and tough successive shocks. In this direction, the IMF resident representative for Georgia, Selim Chakir, provided more details. According to him, the IMF standby agreement with Georgia has fiscal targets. Per Georgia's fiscal rule today, deficit has to come below 3% of GDP by 2023. And then the objective of the government and the IMF is to draw deficit closer to 2% of GDP to have some fiscal room in the light of the high uncertainty. Selim Chakir explained that to get there could be some spending cuts. Some of the COVID-related expenditure this year won't be repeated, so there are some savings, and fiscal is performing well according to the IMF. But going forward, according to the same assessment, could be some cuts needed. Another way to have this fiscal room is to raise some more revenues. But again, here, Georgia's fiscal rule does not allow raising taxes. So the IMF is looking for some other ways for Georgia to do that. One is to further improve tax administration practices, and the other is to review tax exemptions. The IMF is providing technical assistance in that direction to the Georgian government and looking into issues where there can be savings. Selim Chakir also mentioned that this year's revenue performance has been much better than what the IMF envisaged. So there could be a case that substantial measures are not needed to meet the revenue targets and deficit targets. Whether this is the case or not will be more clear this fall when the IMF engages in 2023 budget talks with the government. Jihad Azur focused on two dimensions of the issue: fiscal dimension and equity dimension. Fiscal dimension is clearly related to the fiscal rule. Equity dimension is related to the need for the tax system to treat everyone equally. There are certain exemptions that might be needed for a certain period of time, but in the long run, the tax system must be neutral. According to Jihad Azur, you don't want to have a tax system that promotes one sector in favor of others. Here are some comments that Jihad Azur made for the checkpoints after the meeting. Mr. Azur, welcome you to Tbilisi. And first of all, what were your impressions of talking to all the stakeholders? I mean, you had the meetings with the government officials, also the NBG, also the private sector. So what are the highlights?
It was an opportunity for me to come back to Tbilisi after 2 years because of COVID. And it was an opportunity to discuss with the authorities, the central bank, the private sector, and the students this afternoon about the economic situation here, and also to go over the program that we have recently signed with Georgia with 3 important pillars: how to preserve macroeconomic stability, how to accelerate economic transformation, and also how to widen social protection. And it was an occasion to see how the economy is weathering the various shocks, the COVID-19 shock, the war in Ukraine, as well as also the big transformation we see globally with the increase in inflation and the changes that we see in the global trade.
Yes, you mentioned the standby agreement with Georgia. When shall the program start, and what will be its main objectives?
Well, as you know, the program has been approved by the board, therefore it has already started. It's a precautionary line, which means that it's only used when the country needs it, which is, I think, it's a clear indication that this program is supporting the reforms that Georgia and the Georgian government is implementing. The purpose is to allow the economy to recover faster from those various shocks, to maintain its stability, fight inflation, improve business environment, and also strengthen the social protection framework, and allow also Georgia to accelerate the long-term transformation to an economy where technology, climate-related sectors will be driving the recovery.
Yes, but the standby agreement also includes some technical assistance to Georgia, right? And also some of the reform agenda. So what do you think is the top priority right now to make sustainable the growth numbers that we have, that we all like at this point?
Well, first of all, the cooperation between Georgia and the fund is very deep. We provide a set of various type of technical assistance to the Ministry of Finance, to the central bank, as well as also to other agencies. The objective of those technical assistance is to help accelerate reforms. What type of reforms? One is to strengthen stability by reducing inflation and helping the central bank reduce dollarization. The other set of reforms is to increase productivity and reform the state-owned enterprises. 3 is to improve the overall investment climate and attract additional capital flows to Georgia. All these elements will help accelerate the recovery, keep the growth high, maintain the stability, and also allow Georgia to improve its competitiveness internationally as well as also in the region.
And the last question, and thank you for your time. What about the growth projections for Georgia? Has the fund been thinking of revising it? In which direction? Because right now we see quite different targets for what might come for Georgia in 2022 and onwards.
Well, as you know, at the beginning of the year, we were all projecting a very strong recovery after 2021. That was also a very good year in terms of recovery after COVID. The war in Ukraine made all of us, I would say, aware of the risks, and therefore we have revised downward the growth projection to 3.2%. But I think the nature of the recovery we're seeing, the strengths of this recovery may lead to a revision upward of the growth projection for 2022.
Now, before we turn to the other IFI, EBRD, this time and summarize its 5 years in Georgia, let me give you the sense of what the business week looked like. Our reporter, Natia Taktakishvili, worked hard to pull together this week's Business Wire for you.
Company Udabno, member of Ajara Group, will export organically grown almonds to European market. As Goderdzi Matreveli, director of Udabno, noted, the company will export 6 times more harvest this year compared to 2021. In 2021, the harvest of almonds was up to 3 tons, and this year we will get over 1,500 tons of almond. The price segment of 1 kilogram of almond exported from Georgia ranges between 4 and 6 euros, depending on the size and quality of the product. Last year was a test for us, us. We did laboratory research and we have more than satisfactory results. If all the producers follow the technical regulations, of course we can be competitive on the global market. Notes Goderzi Metreveli. Georgian companies will take almond harvest in autumn. Honey production company Ruchi Queen is conducting negotiations on export in Korea. As the founder of the company Tamar Kvaratskelia told BMG, the matter concerns to a quite large volume and this will be the biggest export agreement for the company. According to her, the priority for the company is the Asia market because in Europe honey is sold in a lower price. We are conducting negotiations on export in Korea. We are talking about a large volume and I think this will be our biggest export project. Ruchi Queen honey is sold in Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. As for Europe, this market is not priority for us because honey is cheaper there, so we choose Asia, where honey is a more valued product, says the founder of Ruchi Queen. Ruchi Queen Enterprise is located in Salanjicha. The annual production of the company is 8 tons of honey and it produces 4 types of honey: acacia, lime, chestnut and field flowers. Norwegian citizen Richard Bjerug, owner of the hotel Ushba Grand Hotel in the village of Bacho in Svaneti, hosts guests from the USA, Switzerland, Austria, and etc. As he notes, his hotel also offers tours of Svaneti to the guests staying at the hotel. According to him, the village should be promoted in order the locals to have a source of income. That's why Bjerug decided to create so-called guidebooks for tourists, as he notes, in cooperation with Greta project funded by European Union, Austria and Sweden. He printed guidebooks from mountain villages.
I learned about this project when COVID had started in the summer of 2020, and I saw that they were launching a project where they were highlighting also something called guidebooks for the mountainous areas of Western Georgia. And since I'd made one guidebook and I was hoping to expand it to Racha, then I thought, oh, maybe I should try to apply for funding. So we did, and we got the funding. So actually the funding goes to printing a new book. It's very concrete. It's a not complicated project, but I hope it will have some impact on tourism development, especially for the smaller villages.
With the help of Greta, the project supported by European Union, Austria and Sweden, a total of 120 hiking routes were combined in one book. Austrian ambassador to Georgia, Mr. Thomas Mühlmann, visited several families and small enterprises in Upper Svaneti who benefited from support of European Union, Sweden and Austria. The ambassador notes joint assistance of European Union, Sweden and Austria has brought noticeable results to the local population.
Because what I'm always discovering, going through, traveling through Georgia, is the similarities between Austria and Georgia. Similar challenges, similar opportunities. And I think one of the areas where the two countries can really cooperate very well is in the mountainous regions, in developing mountain tourism, but also in the area of sustainable tourism, sustainable agriculture. And this is, in essence, the Greta project, which, as you said, is a co-funded project with the European Union, the Austrian Development Corporation in Sweden. And it has basically two components. One is the development of organic farming, and the other one is sustainable mountain tourism. But if you look around here, it's a perfect match. Yeah? It's a very remote area, very beautiful and remote area. But so far, a lot of what tourists need is being brought in from Sugdidi. And of course, it makes sense that if you want to have a gastronomy for tourists, but also for Georgians, that you have short ways of transport. And that's one of the areas that the Greta project works. A couple of greenhouses that help basically to grow locally and sell it on a local market. It is a benefit for all. It's a benefit for the tourism area industry, but it's also of benefit for the farmers because they can have more value for their work.
Currently, 73 small and medium-sized local enterprises in Upper Svaneti, Rachalechumi and Lower Svaneti and Upper Imereti regions are receiving assistance from the European Union, Sweden and Austria in the framework of Greta project. Opening of 3 new malls in Batumi will increase the current gross leasable area in shopping malls threefold, TBC Capital notes in a report on Batumi commercial real estate. Currently, 4 modern shopping malls are operating in Batumi: Batumi Mall, Metro City Forum, Black Sea Mall, and DES Mall. According to the largest real estate developers, the future supply of shopping malls might be even higher. Considering the opening of new high-end malls and positive economic outlook in the region, we expect weighted average rent in Batumi Shopping Mall to increase by 19% in 2023 and additional 26% in 2024-2025, the report reads. Nabareuli wine from Racha and Lechkhumi will be sold in France. The company initially sent several hundred bottles to France, while next order will be fulfilled in the near future. As Sofo Kobaidze, head of export sales of Nabareuli, told BMG, their wines will be exported in the south of France, namely in Languedoc region, which allows the company to send wine to any country of European Union in the shortest possible time. The French have high standards toward foreign imported wine, and we are glad that their interest in our wine is growing constantly. The pitchers method played a special role in this. In addition to France, our wine is sold in 7 export markets, including Great Britain, Finland, Ukraine, Latvia, Czech Republic, and Poland. As for the volume, we send the largest volume of wine to the USA, notes Sofo Kobaidze. The representative of Nabareuli also talks about the future plans of the company in the direction of exports. According to her, the company is also working on entering the Asia market. Fitch Rating has affirmed TBC Leasing at BB- with stable outlook. TBC Leasing operates solely in Georgia, its domestic market, and is the market leader in leasing. The company mainly provides financial leasing to corporate clients of TBC Bank as well as to small and medium-sized enterprises, micro-businesses and individuals. Chocolate confectionery market in Eastern Europe in 2016-2021 grew by 10.5% in retail volume terms. One person in Eastern Europe in 2021 ate 4.3 kilograms of chocolate confectionery, reached the recent data of Euromonitor International published on July 7, World Chocolate Day. Estonia, Bulgaria, and Poland are top 3 countries in Eastern Europe with the highest per capita consumption of chocolate confectionery. Contrary to them, Romania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and North Macedonia are top 3 countries in Eastern Europe with the lowest per capita consumption of chocolate confectionery. As for Georgia, the data here stands at 4.1 kilogram, quite close to Eastern Europe's average 4.3 kilograms. Similar to other countries, per capita chocolate confectionery consumption has been growing in Georgia from year to year. If in 2016 per capita consumption was 3.8 kilogram, in 2017 grew to 3.9 kilogram to 4 kilogram in 2018 and to 4.1 kilogram in 2019. The year 2020 and 2021 stood at 4.1 kilogram, which is related to global pandemic. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development will hold a webinar on trade, finance and factoring facilitation of Ukraine trade during wartime. The webinar will be hosted on Zoom on July 14, which will be attended by TFP and Ukrainian Alliance for Trade, Finance and Factoring. The webinar will focus on trade, finance and factoring markets in Ukraine during the war, how the regulator supports the trade in war times and what tools are available to continue trade in the current situation in Ukraine, and have a professional discussion about possibilities, challenges and restrictions in the market. The webinar will target local banks as well as international commercial banks to show that the Ukraine trade finance market is operating and is in need of support.
It is only logical to come back to what I have announced several times, reporting on 5 years of EBRD in Georgia done by its Caucasus Regional Director, Katarina Berlin-Hansen herself, for our viewers and followers. And it is logical because EBRD is mainly supporting Georgia's private sector and mainly small and medium enterprises. So before we proceed with the interview which Georgi Sakadze and I conducted with Ms. Hansen, let me briefly summarize EBRD's main numbers and directions that have caught our attention. SME growth. 72% of SMEs advised by the EBRD increased their sales, creating a total of 144 million euro of additional turnover. New jobs. 61% of SMEs advised by the EBRD hired more employees, creating a total of 3,531 new jobs. Better skills. EBRD-supported training programs helped 1,426 individuals enhance their skills. Of them, 168 individuals are women who received training under the Women in Business program. Enhanced trade finance. During the COVID-19 crisis, the EBRD supported the financing of Georgia's foreign trade totaling more than 180 million euro via the Trade Facilitation Program. Resilient financial sector. The EBRD invested in the first ever secured corporate bond denominated in Georgian lari and issued the first ever Eurobond in lari. Nearly 75% of EBRD's financing in support of local SMEs was provided in lari. Katarina Berlin-Hansen, EBRD Caucasus Regional Director, will tell you more in the sit-down interview with the editors of Forbes Georgia in the Forbes studio. Welcome, Katarina, to BMG TV this time. We are
still in the Forbes office, but
yeah. Still, it will be her debut on BMG. Of course. So we will be basically talking about the 5 years of EBRD. To summarize, what are some of the results of these 5 years for EBRD, for the stakeholders, for Georgia in general? But let us start with current figures that are out, and that's about economic growth. We have two-digit economic growth, and if you look at the outlooks of economic growth going further, you can see that they are quite different. The government is saying that they will look upwards to this outlook. We have TBC Capital that projects around 10% of economic growth. And more interestingly, we have NBG, which hasn't raised its outlook, and it's still yet, yes, and that's 4.5% of economic growth. What is EBRD's take on economic growth and on these figures?
Well, right now times are turbulent, so it's very difficult to forecast. But in the beginning of the year, we forecasted 3% growth for this year and 5% for next year. Then the war in Ukraine happened, and things got very turbulent. So the present high growth figures are, of course, driven by unprecedented ad hoc factors that are very difficult to predict how long they will last. So I don't have a figure for the year or for next year. I think it's very, very difficult to predict. Of course, I hope that it will be as high as ever possible because it's good for Georgia, but it's extremely difficult to put a figure to the present situation.
What type of combination we got right now is like high economic growth, but also like high inflation. What type of combination is that not only for consumers, for example, but also for doing business as well?
Yeah, the high inflation is, of course, concerning, but Georgia is a very open economy with interactions with all economies around, and this is a global feature, so the inflation is high everywhere, not only in Georgia. And most probably it's going to remain high for a while forward, but then later decline. Again, with the present geopolitical situation, it's very, very difficult to do proper predictions.
Can we consider that uncertainty and unpredictability, what we face, maybe already it's the third year, including the war in Ukraine, is the main challenge which drives all the things around, including inflation, which is already forecasted that the world will definitely move to the deep recession. There are some talks and discussions that we might have combined or combination, let me say so, of the crisis coming from 70s, also the debt crisis of 2008. Stagflation and because correct, stagflation we had in 70s, there was no debt crisis by that period. So this uncertainty will reflect small economy like Georgia is as well, because we're still open economy. So what kind of immunity we can or must create to get prepared for the worst scenario, at least during this unprecedented period?
I would agree with you. It's the third year of crisis, really, and high unpredictability, which is a great impediment for sustainable business development. Many investors are hesitant, and rightly so, and understandably so. But there are also good opportunities in this situation. So, for example, now we see great interest in the middle corridor, the logistics channel through Georgia. And things that Georgia can do is, of course, to focus on utilizing this opportunity to invest as much as possible to make the middle corridor a smooth transport from Asia to Europe. So this is an opportunity that should be used as effectively and as possible. We see lots of interest from investors both from the east and from the west, and also in Georgia looking at both warehouses and other logistics arrangements. So this is something that Georgia should capitalize on. The other thing which is quite important, and that's energy security, where Georgia again can really use the opportunity to diversify the renewable energy sources and develop further energy independence. I think it's very important to focus on this. And we see both domestic and foreign investors looking at Georgia, but here again I think we all need to work together to make sure that this happens sooner rather than later. And this third thing, which is probably very important to address sooner rather than later, is the food security. We saw during COVID, when the supply chains collapsed, that lots of Georgian producers stepped up their production to compensate for the goods that wasn't imported. This seems to continue, but again, the more we can do, the better it is. So there are opportunities rising out of this very difficult and unprecedented situation.
At the same time, going back to resume, time is flying, definitely. These 5 years, portfolio and achievements with challenges EBRD has achieved, it would definitely be changed within the priorities, how it's happening last 2.5 years. But there are definitely a lot of things to discuss, like new jobs, SME growth, better skills, green energy. At the same time, a lot of efforts, Katerina, coming from EBRD, which is one of the most essential investor and partner of this country and the region. Would you identify some priorities during these 5 years as definitely achieved or still challenging?
Well, first I would say I'm quite proud of the results over the last 5 years. If we look at the time when EBRD has been working in Georgia since 1992, we have invested 4.6 billion euros, but 1.5 billion euros is over the last 5 years. So we have really done more over the last 5 years than we did before. Most of what we do is in the private sector, which is great. Also, if you look at this 1.5 billion over the last 5 years, half of that amount is into green investments, using the EBRD definition of green. This is also a great achievement. I'm very proud of that. We have worked a lot with SMEs. We have supported SME advisory services to support individual companies, 400 of them, to access new markets by new export channels, to revise their production methodology. Most of them report that they increased their productivity. Many of them report that they have hired more people as a result of our advisory services, and quite a few report that they have increased their export, which is also great. And we have also provided finance to SMEs. And largely, 70% of the finance to SMEs is in local currency, which is very important for the de-dollarization of the economy, and also to match the loans to the revenues of the SMEs. So, and here we do it mainly through local banks, through credit lines. We work with Women in Business, where we also provide additional support to female entrepreneurs. We work with green economy in credit lines, and we work with SME credit lines. These come and the DCFTA credit lines, the EU alignment credit lines. These credit lines come with technical assistance and to support the companies to reach new levels of operations, to improve their standards. And what is quite important with these credit lines is that this is the method for EBRD to reach out throughout the entire country, because we have a big office here in Tbilisi. We're 45 people, but we can't reach out as much as the local banks can do with their branch networks throughout the country. So it's really our tool to reach the entire country remote areas, disadvantaged groups like women, youth, and so forth, and we are very happy with the results.
What does EBRD measure when talking about the success? When you are saying that these 5 years have been successful, because EBRD's support is one thing. How that support is being utilized and what it brings to the economy is another thing. Do you look at this part as well?
One is definitely defined. 1.5 billion. It's a bank.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, we do
Yeah.
measure other things as well.
See?
In addition to the amount, we measure the number of projects, which is 88, which is quite good. And I wouldn't say I would not measure a project or judge a project from the amount.
Sorry, 88. They are ongoing, completed. What's the status?
These are 88 projects funded during this 5-year period.
Okay,
I think we have around 90 ongoing projects, because some projects are ongoing from before the 5-year period. Yeah. So right now in our active portfolio we have approximately 90 projects that we're working on throughout the country. But what we measure is not the size of projects, because small projects can be definitely as important as big projects.
Absolutely.
So also when we look at, we do infrastructure, for example, we have a very good infrastructure program here. Our flagship program is the Green Cities, which was actually originated in Georgia. So Tbilisi and Batumi are one of the first cities that joined the Green Cities, but now it works in all countries of EBRD's operations. So we are quite proud of that. And through the Green Cities and other infrastructure investments, I think we have targeted or benefited around 2 million people throughout Georgia. And this is through improved transport, for example, in 8 cities, and it's through solid waste management projects. And here again, it's a very good tool to reach out to the regions and create jobs in the regions. And also one other thing which is interesting under Green Cities, we have an electric bus project in Batumi.
Yeah.
You may have seen them, they're very cute, the small white buses. This is the first electric bus project EBRD has ever done. And it's great to do it in Georgia and outside the capital.
Oh, first project worldwide,
ever.
Am I right?
Yes, ever.
Yeah. Ever, yeah.
Yeah,
And measured.
Yes.
Yes,
Because
that's important. Since we are talking about the specific projects, which one is your personal favorite project that you would say has been successful, or maybe it was really challenging, but you still managed to put it on track?
Well, we cover 4 sectors broadly, and I think there are great projects in all these sectors. But since I arrived here just recently before COVID hit, I'm actually very proud with the support we managed to render to Georgia during COVID. Mm-hmm. We basically doubled the volume what we usually do. I have never seen my team work as hard. They usually work very hard, but during COVID that was exceptional. So we provided 630 million euros to Georgia during 2020, which is more than double than we have ever done any year before. And that was really necessary. It was made available really quickly. And I'm very proud of that achievement, because it really made a difference during a very difficult year. And everyone was working from home, and of course the technology at the time, we didn't work really well. Now we're all used to it, but at the time we weren't. Did
the COVID, by the way, change the priorities? Maybe you had some plan for Georgia, but then, COVID, did it change something in approaches, in projects?
No, it actually didn't, but it reconfirmed a few assumptions that we made. It reconfirmed the importance of focusing on access to finance to SMEs, because we really we ramped that up during COVID, and we realized that we can do much more than we have done in the past, and we are doing that now. We have also been working on renewable energies for a long time, and this again reinforced the importance of energy security, food security, and just local production. And it also reinforced the importance of nearshoring, if I can put it that way, a good cooperation with your immediate neighbors, assuming that the neighbors are friendly. So again, this is something that Georgia can capitalize on now when the middle corridor needs to be developed.
Yes. What are the main challenges now, and looking forward, what is the agenda of EBRD towards Georgia? Georgia's private sector? So to say?
Well, in the private sector, we would really like to develop the renewable energy sector. It's something that Georgia needs to do here and now, and diversify it, because there are options for both solar and wind, in addition to the hydros, of course. It's also very important to take well care of foreign investors. When they come into the country, they of course need help. Now, with the geopolitical uncertainties and the world around us, they probably need even more care than they used to do. And investor aftercare is something that we focus very much on, and right now we are supporting Enterprise Georgia to set up a program for that. This is something where it has always been important, but now with whatever is going on around us, I think companies that are coming in from abroad want to establish in Georgia, they need even more support, even possibly moral support, to feel comfortable.
Actually, we've heard that concern over and over again from business associations as well, that especially for the FDI and foreign investors, it would be really good to have some kind of like a contact point for these persons at least, so that they know what they are doing in the country.
I think the system already exists. Georgia is a very easy country to start working in. Because it's so easy to establish here. So some investors seem a bit surprised when they run into some issues. But anywhere you work, in any country, you will run into issues when you do investment. So, but again, it's very, very important to provide proper aftercare to any investors that is working in the country. That can be foreign. That should also definitely be Georgian investors, because the majority of the investors that we work with now, they are Georgian, and they're doing a really good job, and they also need attention. Just the obstacles that they run into is very often a bit of a mismatch in legislation and so forth. These kind of obstacles need to be removed quite quickly. We work on this through the Investors Council, which is a very good platform for addressing like legal impediments for additional investments.
Yeah, my next question was about the Investment Council, which is fully funded by EBRD.
It's actually fully funded by the UK. But it's run by the EBRD, yes.
It's run by EBRD, yeah. Thanks to Her Majesty again, yeah. Correct. Tell me about the council itself. Is it effective enough? I mean, I'm not talking about only members or actually the managers of the council itself. I mean, the purpose of the council itself was well defined from the very beginning. Are they following the general agenda? And I'm not talking about the daily or monthly achievements. I mean, we're trying to expect some more from them. And it's not because we're media. No, not at all. But at the same time, we really want to see some messages, what you just stated, that something should be done more in favor of investors who are happy with the procedures of the beginning of the business in Georgia, but at the same time definitely have some update and news, Katerina, regarding some ongoing problem within some institutions like legals are. I'm talking about the court, I'm talking about some reforms, including institutionals, etc. Could Investment Council, sorry for the long question, could Investment Council be more effective?
Everyone can always be more effective.
Thank you for that.
I think it goes for all of us. But having said that, the Investors Council, I find this a very efficient policy dialogue tool, a reform tool for EBRD and for the country as such. Basically, what comes to media is, of course, the Investors Council meeting with the government, which happens 3 or 4 times per year. But that is only a very small part of the work that the Council actually does. Under the Council, there is a number of working groups that address legal impediments and other issues in the economy to remove obstacles to enhanced business. So, for example, Georgia didn't have a legislation about investment funds. So funds that wanted to work in Georgia had to register elsewhere. The Council helped to develop such a legislation, which is now in place. So now investment funds can register here and operate here.
And we have already 4 of them. 4 investment funds already, and one of them yesterday declared, Foresight Capital, Georgian entity, that they already raised $4 million USD.
Yes, and Foresight
This is
Capital,
very
I remember
important
your
point.
interview, and Foresight Capital
Yeah.
said that because of the legislation, they were able to...
Absolutely. From 2020, the legislation is on, as
to
Katarina
come
mentioned,
to Georgia.
and this is official already, but not only official. They are operative, and it's going to be fantastic impact to the capital market.
Yeah, yes, it's great. And another one is the legislation on covered bond, which will attract a lot of investments into Georgia, which is another one which is great. So there are a number of there is also factoring legislation and the leasing legislation that the council is working on. Again, this will be excellent tools for SMEs, especially in the agri sector, because you don't need to own your own harvest combiner, for example. You can lease it. So the more of tools we can dispatch into the Georgian economy, the better it is. And the way it works is that the business association or companies or individuals bring an issue into to the attention of the IC. Then there is a discussion which topics the IC should work on. Of course, there is a limit to how much they can do, because there is, the limit to how many people work there. But we also use the support of consultants to do preparatory work. We cannot the IC cannot work on individual cases. So if there is a company that has a company-specific issue, we will not touch it. But if there is a sectoral issue to unlock opportunities and a company brings it to our attention, we will definitely look at it, assuming there is something that we can reasonably do.
Sorry, Georgi, since you allowed us to peek behind the kitchen of the Investors Council and told us about these working groups, which is very interesting, of course. Would such topics, because you mentioned, right, some opportunities for Georgia. You mentioned the Middle Corridor, and here we have a very huge problematic project there that was an unclear port, and being an unclear in place, it might have helped the whole corridor. That's one thing. Also, you mentioned energy security. There we have a very huge problematic project, which is Namajuani case, which we don't know whether it goes to arbitrary courts or not. So would such, profound projects, which are really problematic and challenging for Georgia's future development, be on the agenda? Because what is the best thing about the Investors Council for me personally, as for the media, is that there are investors, you, IFIs, and also the government, and that's a very good platform for exchanging those ideas, for maybe solving some problems there as well.
Both Anaklia and Namajuani are individual cases. So what the Investors Council can help with is to look at, for example, tenders for renewables, investment promotion for the Middle Corridor, and things like that. So as long as it's not an individual case with an individual investor, the Investors Council can look at it.
What we definitely have while in a process of preparation for the interview is that the EBRD invested also the first ever secured bond. I'm talking about which was denominated in Georgian lari and issued the first ever Eurobond in Georgian lari as well. And at the same time, nearly 75% of your financing, EBRD, in support of local Georgian SMEs, was provided in Georgian lari. You also touched the point about de-dollarization as an important one. We are in I cannot say it's tough, but we are in debates with National Bank of Georgia, always with our good friends and colleagues, about to understand the importance of the dollarizations, what we definitely follow, Katerina. But at the same time, we are also followed by official and non-official laws of demand on the market. Where is the golden medium for Georgia for the dollarization?
Well, I don't have the crystal ball for that, but what is important is that if a company has its revenues in lari, they need to borrow in lari, because otherwise they expose themselves to exchange rate risks, which is really unnecessary. And the lari rates need to be affordable and they need to be accessible. So we do whatever we can, and it's not always enough, I do acknowledge that, but we are really trying to make sure that those who operate in Lari have access to finance in Lari.
My next question, just from today's interview, coming from Galton Target Managing Director Otar Sharikadze. I was interviewing him and Zurab Lazashvili about one of your latest projects. I mean, your participation together with the EU. UK is not involved in this particular project. I'm talking about your support in regards of the capital market further development. My question to them and to you is the following. Could we do it a bit earlier and support capital market further development in Georgia 2, 3, 4 years ago? I'm talking about the investment legislation as well, which was legalized for 2020. I am very much supportive of the capital market development. At the same time, I do understand the risks for the local, I mean for the small economy like Georgia is. But are we in time with the further development of the capital market, or we're a bit late?
That's a very difficult one. There is a question about the maturity of the companies that would participate in such exercises as well. Now, yesterday I participated in the workshop with the companies that participate in the program you mentioned. We thought when we opened this opportunity to support companies to access capital markets that we would have maybe 10 participants, and we actually have 21. So we are very pleased with this, and I know there are additional companies that would like to join if we do a second round, which we hope we will do. If this could have happened earlier, well, probably yes, but then the last 2-3 years have been turbulent. So the idea actually came up during the COVID time, when we saw that there were so many companies who got over leveraged. They had too much loan compared to their equity, and then we just needed to see, let's see if we can prepare any of them for an IPO. This is probably more difficult than preparing them to do corporate bonds, but we started working with them for a general access to capital markets. And the interest is great, but many companies where you have excellent entrepreneurs, they are very technically oriented. They know their field very well, but the capital markets for them is a bit of a black box. So there is a bit of a education process that we need to be through, and this is exactly what we're doing with companies now, to find the right tools for them at this point in time, because there may be a great opportunity for an IPO, but there are a couple of steps that they need to do before that to be ready to do a good IPO.
Do you see this readiness for more openness, for more transparency from the Georgian companies? Because that's what we have been facing before the Saras reform. It was really hard for us to even make our rankings, original rankings, because nothing was open. Now we see that there are positive steps, and we can do, at least we can do.
Even the major stakeholders, I mean, Galton Taggart and BDO Georgia themselves, they didn't expect 21 participants, which are already officially launched through this program, and before the end of September, they should make another sortation of it. So, I mean, the Georgian entities are quite active, which makes me happy.
Yeah. So do you see this readiness?
I think the transparency is there.
Yeah.
Companies are generally happy to show their true figures. So we don't really have an issue with that. Where we do have discussions is the reporting that the company would need to do if you go through this kind of process, and also some corporate governance measures would probably be welcome to have truly independent board members. Yeah. Because it's very easy you have this good friend, this is a good business person, let's invite this person to sit on my board. But that person is probably not going to challenge you too much. So it may be good to have truly independent board members. And this area is also something where we actually do train companies in Georgia. We've done it in 5-6 cities about corporate governance and potential board structures. So this is something that is ongoing. It's a developing field in Georgia, but we see great interest in it, which is a very good first step.
I have a confess to yourself. Yes. And I will be talking about, not to Katerina, because the measurement of the last 5 years, I missed that point. There is another one, definitely, in regards of advices coming for SMEs from EBRD, for SMEs from EBRD, hiring more employees, which is also creating a total of 3,500 new jobs, which is also very important, and which is, it's an official one, because consulting and advices coming from EBRD is one of the most essential part of your job.
Yes, this, the ASB, the Advice for Small Business program, is doing really well. If you look at the total time when EBRD has worked in Georgia, we worked with more than 1,500 companies throughout the country. Many of them, more than half, I guess, is outside Tbilisi, which is very, very good. It's an excellent tool to reach out and initiate cooperation with the company. So many of the banking clients that we have today started as an advisory client, and then we helped them grow, and then eventually they accessed finance through credit lines, and then eventually they came to us as direct clients. So it's very nice to see these growth paths. But the Advice for Small Business program is very good because it looks at the company at individual basis. What does this particular company need to be able to prosper? And then we support them by matching them with consultants, which we have partially financed to make sure that they actually reach what they need to do. And a very interesting part of this is when you start talking to a company, they may have one idea what they want to do, and what we actually then start doing may be something different once we've been through a process of diagnostics, I would call it, I guess.
Yeah.
The results are excellent, and we continue to work with many of the companies even after the first assignment has been completed. And another thing which is great with this program is the development of the consultancy sector. So because we are mainly using Georgian consultants for this, and they have now excellent track records. They can work regionally, they can work across many countries. And we use in other countries where EBRD is working, we use Georgian consultants to help us with selected tasks. So it's an excellent also development of the consultancy sector of the economy.
Yes. Do you see any effects of DCFTA and the regulations that these businesses have already implemented? And do you see this growth in quality of doing business because of DCFTA? Because we see figures like exports figures, and we see now, hopefully, we see this urge for more diversification and not being, dependent only on the Russian market. But do you see this quality in doing business as well?
I see the enhanced understanding of quality. Most of the clients that we speak to, they want to make sure that their whatever they produce, it's at a high enough standard. So they are able to export to the EU. They may not end up doing it, they may end up exporting to another country, but I think it seems to be the general rule is if the EU standard requirements are met, you can export to just about any country, like the Gulf, East, and so forth, because they will acknowledge that if this meets EU standard, it's a good standard too. It will be accepted. So I think yes, I see the enhanced understanding of all sorts of higher standard measures, which is quite encouraging to see. It will prepare Georgia for. It will prepare Georgia for the future, really.
The nearest future, by December 2022, is the EU candidate status for Georgia. Would that change anything in how EBRD deals with Georgia if we got that status, or would there be some changes in priorities and funding, the way the support works?
Status, crossing fingers.
Well, let's hope it's going to happen. I really sincerely hope it's going to happen. It's a lot of work to be done before that, so let's all crack on and do it. It would not change the way EBRD works. But if there are, of course, additional requests to do something to align with some kind of requirements, or if there is an additional need to invest in a certain sector, we would of course look at that. We would be happy to look at that. Since I don't know what could possibly come up, it's very difficult to say, yes, absolutely, we will do it, but we will definitely be interested in supporting the path.
Of course. And would that work for the investor trust towards Georgia, that Georgia has this status in hands, hopefully?
Well, I would assume it would definitely contribute to the trust of European investors, but also other investors from other countries. So I sincerely hope that this is going to work out.
Okay, we're moving to the final part of our conversation, and my question is the following. If 5 years before from now, it was rather easier, Katerina, to produce any kind of predictions of EBRD, what might be priorities, directions, and things like that. I do understand that we might define like logistics or infrastructure as a priority, but what we faced last 8 months in regards of logistics and Georgia considering as a corridor, nobody could expect it, the traffic, what we have right now. We've talked about 5 years before, till today. What can we say for the next 5 years?
You will need a crystal ball now.
She's not with me. Today she's not definitely. I confessed. I did everything what I could. No.
Well, let's hope that in 5 years' time, Georgia is going to have a completely diversified renewable energy sector. That would be a great achievement. There is opportunities to diversify, so let's do it now, and that the energy security is firmly in place. This will be a game changer for Georgia. Let's also hope that we have brought in all the foreign investors to invest along the middle corridor, that they are operating and that goods is coming through, that there is enhanced port capacity, because this is an additional factor which is a bit of a bottleneck right now in any format, but it needs to happen. And I also really like the interest in Georgia as a destination for companies' back office work and for development work, and there are lots of companies now who are looking at Georgia to relocate from other places. We see lots of companies that come and look at Georgia and they compare with the other countries in the region to see, should we move here or should we move somewhere else? Let's hope that Georgia manages to attract a great deal of these companies that are now looking at the country, to make them establish here. Georgia has great human capital potential. Training is needed, but training is needed everywhere. So Georgia is a welcoming country, so I sincerely hope that companies will choose to establish here.
And let's hope that next time we have this discussion or summary of the results, Georgia will have the candidate
status.
Yes.
Yeah, we need some 4 or 5 months for that, like till November, the end of November, as far as I know.
Yeah, let's try.
Good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good luck and thank you for everything.
So that's all for today. We will meet next Sunday, but till then, you know what to do. Yes, definitely follow us on Forbes.g and BM.g and stay updated on business and economics in Georgia and beyond. See you.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.